All right, so when you think late Cretaceous, what's the first thing that pops into your head? T-Rex, right? Stomping around North America, the undisputed king. But here's the thing. While a tyrant was ruling the north, the entire southern half of the planet, it was run by a totally different and honestly way weirder dynasty of emperors. So let's meet the horned emperors of the south.
So yeah, the North had its famous tyrant king, we all know him. But down in the massive southern supercontinent of Gondwana, they had the Bulldog Emperors. And who are they? Well, they were the Abelisauridae, a whole family of horned, short-faced, tiny-armed speedsters that basically turned an entire hemisphere into their own private hunting ground. And believe me, these guys weren't just other dinosaurs. They were an absolute masterpiece of radical evolution.
So this is the story of Gondwana's bulldogs. We're about to dive into how this totally unique family of predators managed to dominate half the world. And they didn't do it by copying the Tyrannosaur playbook. No way. They forged a completely new, totally bizarre path to the top of the food chain. You know, for the longest time, our picture of these southern predators was fuzzy, to say the least. We kind of just lumped them all together, calling them Allosaur clones. But then, 1985 happened. Down in Argentina, two paleontologists, Jose Bonaparte and Fernando Novas, they dig up this skull that just shattered everything we thought we knew. It was tall, short, and had this really strange rocky texture. This was Abelisaurus camoensis, and it was our very first clue that Gondwana was playing by a completely different set of evolutionary rules.
That one discovery really opened the floodgates, and what we started to realize was that this was a predator defined by its most incredible feature: a head that was less like a knife and more like a battering ram.
Okay, so the sciencey term for this is brachiocephalic, and really that's just a fancy way of saying bulldog-headed. Unlike the long, pointy snouts you see on most predators, Abelisaurs went with these super short, deep skulls. And this wasn't just a fashion statement, oh no. This shape was a key adaptation for a really specific, really brutal way of fighting.
And if you could actually reach out and touch one of these fossil skulls, you'd notice it isn't smooth at all. It's covered in this rough, bumpy texture we call rugosity. What that tells us is that in life, their faces were covered in a thick layer of keratin. Yep, the same stuff as our fingernails. This gave them built-in face armor, which was perfect for intimidating rivals, and more importantly, for protecting their skulls during a messy, violent hunt.
And this face armor came with some pretty serious accessories. Just take the most famous Abelisaur, carnivorous. It had two big, reinforced horns sitting right over its eyes. And we know from scans that these weren't just for show, they were structurally solid. It really suggests these animals were literally headbutting or shoving each other around, kind of like prehistoric rams.
Then you've got Majungasaurus over in Madagascar. It took a totally different approach, evolving this single, blunt unicorn horn right in the middle of its forehead. A completely different look for its headgear, but probably serving a very similar purpose for display in combat.
And just to show you the family's diversity, check out Rajasaurus from India. It sported this lower, thickened crest instead of big, sharp horns. It just goes to show how this family adapted the same basic idea, an armored, weaponized head for all sorts of different environments and pressures.
Pretty cool, right?
Okay, so we've covered the super impressive head. Now, we kind of have to talk about the less impressive part, the arms. And folks, this is one of the biggest paradoxes in all of dinosaur evolution.
And if you thought T-Rex had it rough with the arm jokes, wow. Abelisaurs make a T-Rex look like a bodybuilder. Seriously, just look at this comparison. A carnivorous arm is barely even there. It's just this little nub. It has no functional wrist, 0 claws, and 4 fused fingers that were probably all wrapped up in a little mitten of skin. They were, for all practical purposes, completely and utterly useless.
So that leads to the big evolutionary question, right? Why? Why would this huge, powerful predator evolve to have arms that couldn't even reach its own mouth? Why would you shrink something down until it's barely even there?
The answer really comes down to one simple concept: efficiency. As their heads and their jaws evolved to be the main weapon, this incredible bite and hold machine, the arms just became dead weight. And evolution does not like dead weight. So it made a trade. It got rid of the arms, and it put all that biological energy into building an even bigger, more powerful neck and skull. And it shifted the center of gravity back for one massive advantage: speed. And that speed came from a place you might not expect. Not the legs, but the tail. You see, the Abelisaur's tail wasn't just for balance. It was literally an engine.
So the secret to their speed was this one huge muscle called the cauda femoralis. It connects the tail to the upper leg, and it provides that main power stroke when you're running. Now in Abelisaurs, the bones in their tail have these unique flared-out wings, and those wings provided a massive attachment point for an absolutely enormous version of this muscle. Their tail was basically a rocket booster attached to their legs.
So what does a rocket-powered tail actually get you? How about a top speed of around 50 kilometers per hour? That's about 31 miles per hour. I mean, let that sink in for a second. A 2-ton predator with armored bullhorns sprinting at you faster than an Olympic runner. Just game over.
And they absolutely needed that incredible speed. Why? Well, because of what was on the menu. Abelisaurs weren't going after small stuff. They were hunting the largest land animals to ever walk the earth.
So, how does a 2-ton sprinter with a battering ram for a head and basically no arms take down a 50-ton giant? They probably used a brutal but very efficient tactic we call slash and flee. Step 1, the charge. Use that insane speed to get right up next to a colossal titanosaur. Step 2, the bite. Deliver a single devastating deep wound to a leg or the tail with those powerful bulldog jaws. And then step 3, the pursuit. They'd back off and just follow the bleeding giant, waiting patiently for it to weaken from shock and blood loss. It was a war of attrition.
And man, were they successful at it. Abelisaurs didn't just fade away because they were some kind of evolutionary failure. Not at all. In fact, 66 million years ago, they were at the absolute peak of their power. They were dominating continents from South America to Africa, even into Europe. They were extinguished at their very best, when the asteroid hit and the whole food chain just collapsed. The plants died, the titanosaurs starved, and without those giants, the emperors had nothing left to rule.
So what do we take away from all this? What's the legacy of these incredible predators? And what does their story really teach us about how evolution works?
When it comes right down to it, the Abelisaurs are the ultimate proof that evolution doesn't have a single right answer. To be an apex predator, you don't have to be a Tyrannosaurus. They show us a completely different, wildly successful path. They were the weird, they were the wonderful, and they were the terrifying kings of the Southern Hemisphere. And they're a great reminder that while the North may have had a king, the South had an emperor.